With more, we're now joined by Chris Severson-Baker, Executive Director of the Pembina Institute. Chris, thank you for joining us this evening.
My pleasure.
Now, with the invocation of this act, the Alberta government essentially is making this argument that Ottawa's clean electricity regulations will hurt households and businesses in Alberta by making it more expensive to heat their homes and turn on the lights. What do you make of that argument?
We've done our own analysis to show how Alberta could achieve a net zero grid and maintaining affordability, maintaining the similar prices that we're experiencing today by 2035. And it boils down to scaling up solar and wind, which is abundant in Alberta, and combining that with natural gas-fired power plants that have carbon capture associated with them, which is also something that Alberta has a lot of experience with and has the right geology to undertake. And so we don't agree that it's not doable. In fact, we think it's very achievable, and it's what Alberta should be striving to do.
Although Alberta, in also making the argument from the Danielle Smith, the government, they essentially say that, Alberta already has reduced emissions by more than 50% in the last 18 years, and that's because the province transitioned, as you know, away from coal-powered plants to natural gas plants. And essentially it seems that they want to have credit for that without having to move towards the 2035 target. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think a clean grid is the backbone of a net zero economy. And all of our competitors are very well aware of this. The United States has a similar target as Canada. The EU has a similar target. And frankly, international investors and companies are looking for places in the world to set up their operations and looking for places where they can get energy and materials, essentially, the so-called supply chain for the products that they want to build from places that have clean electricity, because they have commitments to achieve net zero in the future. And so it's really not it's not an advantage for any jurisdiction to try to hang on to a fossil fuel based grid. So if we want to decarbonize houses, cars, and even the oil and gas industry in Alberta, we need a clean grid to do that.
Okay, listen, I'm going to get into the impact of not turning towards a net zero grid sooner rather than later. But, of course, we also know that the province did create this moratorium on more clean energy sources like wind and solar. What's your reasoning behind that? Why do you think they did that?
Honestly, I think that the decision to put a pause on renewable energy development in Alberta, on approvals for new projects, was just simply a bad decision. And it really has had a negative impact on how the investment community is looking at Alberta, not just in the renewable energy sector space, but across the energy sector. And expanding, invoking the Sovereignty Act, which is essentially saying, we're going to have a different set of rules in Alberta than what the federal government is putting in place for the rest of the country, is going to create an enormous amount of uncertainty and just really extend the harm that moratorium had on a part of the energy system to the whole energy sector in Alberta.
So why do you think this is being done then? Why do you think they're invoking the act right now? More political than policy front, do you think?
Well, it really does. We've had some months of the new UCP government in Alberta, and it is very much looking like they're very committed to fighting with Ottawa, asserting their sort of more independence from the federal government, and less interested in attracting investment to the province, less interested in sort of creating stability, ensuring that there's jobs, and certainly much more interested in fighting with Ottawa than implementing their own climate plan. So we've heard a lot about Danielle Smith's commitment to achieving net zero by 2050, but there's been absolutely no policies put in place or even any discussion about how Alberta would start to make strides towards that. And so, I think, a lot of Albertans should be very concerned about what impact this is going to have on the economy.
Should be concerned. What's your take of it, though? Are Albertans on side with Danielle Smith on this one?
I think when people went to the polls, they were very concerned about the economy. They were very concerned about future prosperity. And I think a lot of people who typically voted conservative in the past voted conservative again because they associate the Conservative brand with being strong on the economy. But we really haven't seen behavior that's consistent with how provinces tend to be governed in the past. No government has ever put a pause on development in the energy industry because there was a need to address some concerns with the pace of scale of development. That just simply has never happened. There's always been a process that's resolved those concerns while development continues to occur. And that's really, that's sort of taken for granted by companies that operate in Alberta and investors up until this year.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the economic impact. If you will, can you dig down deeper into that one? Because I do wonder, what is the danger if Alberta focuses on the original goal of net zero by 2050 rather than the more ambitious goal of 2035?
Well, companies are looking at making very large-scale investments in power generation, in decarbonizing industrial operations, and decarbonizing oil and gas operations right now. Some of them are waiting for the rules to become clear, and they're at the same time they're trying to line up supporters and in the investment community to advance those projects. And it becomes extremely difficult to do that if you cannot explain to those investors what the rules of the game are going to be. So a lot of these projects are in the $1 billion sort of price tag range. You just cannot move ahead with $1 billion investment if you don't know what the rules of the game are going to be, which set of regulations are going to apply, whether or not you're going to be able to access the federal government's investment tax credit or not, what the carbon price is going to be in the future. These are all things that are essential to understand before you make those investments. And other jurisdictions we're seeing announcements of those scales of investment because the provincial policies are clear, and it's clear that they are consistent with what the federal government is rolling out.
Chris Severson-Baker, really appreciate the time tonight. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.